When it comes to the history of any civil rights movement, you have a lot of serious issues, national debates, historic moments ranging from marches to even the occasional physical clash. But there are also times where there are very silly protests, where they know they're being ridiculous, but that's the point. Nevertheless, they can still be an important part of a civil rights movement. The LGBT civil rights movement is no exception, and in this video we're going to look at the LGBT civil rights movement in Australia that had perhaps one of the most over-the-top forms of protest, a breakaway LGBT kingdom. In 2001, the Netherlands became the first country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage. Belgium would follow in 2002, as well as the Canadian province of Ontario in 2003, which by itself was effectively a third of Canada. With legal gay marriage now existing in multiple places, and with movements to legalize it everywhere well underway, other countries including Australia had to decide on whether to recognize such marriages if a same-sex married couple from one of those places immigrated to Australia. In Australian law, there was already a law in place called the Marriage Act of 1961, which stated that any foreign established marriage would be legally valid in Australia as long as there were no overlaps with other marriages, both parties were adults, and that they weren't close relatives. In addition, the Family Law Act of 1975 outlined the recognition of general relationships for same-sex couples to give them benefits that hetero couples had in basically the equivalent of civil unions. With these two laws in place, there was technically a loophole for foreign same-sex couples to have their marriage recognized in Australia as they fit the three criteria, and they were already going to be given civil union benefits anyway. But this loophole wasn't going to be ignored, as Australia's Prime Minister at the time was John Howard. John Howard became Australian Prime Minister in 1996, and for the first few years in office enjoyed high popularity, mainly due to his administration presiding over economic stability and being given credit for it. However, several people didn't like John Howard because for his entire political career he was very socially conservative to the point of controversy. Notably in the 1980s when he was leader of the opposition, he was famous for demanding a limitation on Asian immigrants. Then when Prime Minister Hawke put up a motion that race and ethnicity would not be used as an immigration selection criteria, John Howard doubled down and opposed the motion. John Howard's views and actions here were so divisive and considered backwards that it caused him to lose leadership of the Liberal Party in 1989. Despite this, the next few years the Liberal Party went through multiple short-lived leaders that would exhaust their political careers that left for a 1995 leadership election where John Howard ran unopposed and was now in charge again. In 1996, John Howard promised he'd changed his mind about the whole xenophobia thing, and to reinforce this new image, when a controversial Liberal candidate in Queensland named Pauline Hanson proposed to remove Aboriginal Australians from government assistance and vow that she would stop Australia from being, quote, swamped by Asians, John Howard removed his party's endorsement of her and kicked her out of the party so she wouldn't ruin the party's image, resulting in Pauline Hanson forming her own far-right party called One Nation that has been one of Australia's biggest punching bags ever since. Aside from this though, John Howard became notable for still dragging his heels on any other form of civil reform or civil rights. In the 1990s, there were calls to begin reconciliation with Australia's Aboriginal population, hoping for an apology on past atrocities and maybe setting in motion for some form of reparations. John Howard did eventually agree to pass a motion of reconciliation in 1999. It didn't really improve anything though. To sum up what happened...
You're sorry for making your uncle homeless?
Well, I'm not happy about it.
So you're not even sorry about it?
Nah.
You just feel a little bit sad?
Yeah, but if I'm honest, not much.
That's not even hyperbole. Howard refused to pass any bill that specifically contained the word sorry in it, using the logic of, well, it wasn't my fault, so why should I apologize? So when it came to the issue of LGBT civil rights, no one was surprised that John Howard wasn't going to be the one to advance things forward. As the issue of the previously mentioned legal loopholes for foreign gay couples became an issue in 2003, various LGBT activists would protest to protect those loopholes and of course campaign for outright marriage equality. But some thought that since John Howard wouldn't budge, perhaps it might be time to take matters into their own hands. If Australia wasn't going to change, they needed to find the right place just for them. On June 14, 2004, several activists on a ship hilariously dubbed the Gay Flower sailed to Cato Island, an island within the Coral Sea. For those unfamiliar, the Coral Sea has several scattered islands of varying but tiny size, and they're administered as a territory by Australia. Except for a single-digit amount of scientists who conduct research on the islands, no one permanently lives there, so these activists went to Cato Island and established a camp called Heaven, named after a notable gay bar in London. There they planted the rainbow pride flag and declared the formation of the gay and lesbian kingdom of the Coral Sea Islands over the entirety of the territory. Obviously, this didn't really elicit much of a response from the government, but they were intending to keep this up as long as possible in some form. They agreed to adopt the euro as currency, they established Dale Parker Anderson as emperor, and declared that anyone could become a citizen of the kingdom if they were LGBT. Now, believe it or not, while it could be easy to simply conclude that the whole emperor and kingdom bit is just a bit of fun over-the-top LARPing to get attention, there was actually a specific legal reason they went with a monarchy instead of something else. Australia is a part of the British Commonwealth, and it is still therefore a constitutional monarchy with many overlapping British laws still within its legal system. Under the archaic English Treason Act of 1495, a de facto king of a nation cannot be guilty of treason in relation to any act against the lawful king, and that anyone who interfered with the monarch's duties could be charged with treason. The original intent was to let the War of the Roses wage on so that Henry VII couldn't be executed for seizing the crown, but he could execute his enemies upon obtaining the crown. Nevertheless, though, this law was still within the British system and had been used in the past by other micronations in Australia to avoid being sent to jail for treason for declaring independence. In August of 2004, John Howard and his government finally amended the law to close any loopholes that would recognize foreign gay marriages or potentially lead the way to allow for new ones at home. This led to the kingdom declaring war on Australia on September 13th. Now, obviously, this was a silly over-the-top protest to support marriage equality in Australia. So how did that go? Well, in 2007, John Howard lost the election to Labour under Kevin Rudd. While Kevin Rudd wasn't conservative, he wasn't pro-marriage equality either. Rudd was a practicing Catholic and at the time believed gay marriage was incompatible with his beliefs. The succeeding Labour leader Julia Gillard also opposed legislation supporting same-sex marriage. But things would change in 2013 when Kevin Rudd was back as Labour leader for a second time, and he announced that after a personal change of heart on the issue, he had come to a religious conclusion to support gay marriage. Unfortunately, it ended up not mattering as he would lose the 2013 election to the Liberals under Tony Abbott, who did not support marriage equality. But by this point, it was the 2010s, and support for same-sex marriage was so high that eventually Tony Abbott's government conceded to pressure and agreed that there would be a nationwide vote on the matter sometime after the next election in 2016. Abbott would lose leadership of the party due to unpopularity and scandals and would be succeeded by Malcolm Turnbull, who would still host the nationwide vote. On November 7, 2017, the Australian Marriage Law Postal Survey returned results showing that 61.6% of the voters supported same-sex marriage. Turnbull's government in turn decided it would just be best to make the legal changes and move on instead of dragging the issue further. So while the gay and lesbian kingdom of the Coral Islands varied in activity throughout this time, it's not like they camped on the island for 13 straight years, but they were still officially in existence. So with same-sex marriage now being inevitable in Australia, they decided to officially dissolve on November 17, 2017. But hey, at least they left behind some cool postage stamps. Turnbull's government passed a change to Australian laws allowing for same-sex marriage, which would go into effect on December 9, 2017. Now, I'm not going to pretend that this protest kingdom is the reason why marriage equality passed in Australia. Civil rights movements involve a lot of people, a lot of protests, a lot of action. But come on, sometimes over-the-top goofy protests are just fun. I'm Emperor Tigerstar, and I'll see you guys next time.